James Hetfield, lead guitar, no. James Hetfield, rhythm guitar and vocals.
Lars Ulrich, trommer. Kirk Hammett, guitar and attempted vocals.
Roberto Agustin Miguel Santiago San Juan Trujillo Veracruz, kazoo.
Yeah!
Bob used to be a woman.
Look at tough guy.
And then we should try and get something that is a little more, got a little more of a different sound. So it really sticks out. Maybe even like the Leslie 12 string, like we talked about yesterday.
Dick!
Oh, God, help!
We do what we want to do, you know. They consider that selling out, then whatever.
A lot of people think you sold out just because you're on a major label and are very popular.
Or maybe you don't play 1,000 miles an hour the whole time, or, you know.
I mean, we'd be doing the same thing if we were still on, you know, independent label.
Hey, thanks for watching Numbskull News, and today, doing a video about Metallica. That's right, everyone's heard about Metallica, right? They're the veterans, the GOATs, the greatest of all time, the biggest metal band ever to exist. They got all the respect, all the love, basically of the entire music industry nowadays. A lot of the new acts now, they cite Metallica as inspiring them to be what they are now. However, they did have to kind of swim through a river of shit to get to where they are. They had to overcome a horrible label that was put on them for years. And I feel it's rather unfairly, and we're going to walk through it. The label is that people constantly called them sellouts. Sellouts. Like it's bad to be so big. But that's how it was viewed. Now, before I go any further, I needed to figure out, okay, what exactly is a sellout? Well, I got a smartphone, and so you can go online and find out anything. So I really wanted to get a proper definition for sellout. Well, I busted it down to this. The definition is when you're willing to compromise morality, authenticity, or integrity for personal gain. That's what a sellout is. So, we're going to go by that premise and that definition. However, I think it's best to leave out morality. We're talking about heavy metal here. So, morality doesn't really play a big role in metal. So, we're going to stick with the two that I think are at the core of this whole sellout bullshit. And that is authenticity and integrity. So, as a brief history lesson, Metallica started out, of course, small, starving artists, trying to get going, and they did. You know, they signed with Megaforce Records, which is a small indie label, and they did Kill 'Em All, Ride the Lightning, their first two albums on that small little record label. And then they got the notice of the big dogs. One of the big dogs being Elektra signed them, and then they did Master of Puppets and everything else after that. And everything was trucking along pretty good. Widely respected. They were the kings of the thrash world. The thrash world in the 80s, that was the underground metal scene, the big, thriving underground metal scene. You had the beginnings of death metal, but they weren't making any money. They weren't able to tour much. You know, thrash was it. You know, unless you were the big hair bands, which all the thrash people really hated, and we're going to get into that. But if you wanted to be able to make a living playing music, and you loved metal, but you didn't want to sell out, you know, you didn't want to, you know, put on your mom's makeup and done a hairspray and play a bunch of pointless, meaningless, heartless songs, then, you know, thrash was the way to go. Metallica being the kings of that, I mean, they were trucking along great, man. Everyone respected them, everyone loved them, and then they did Injustice for All. And the very first time that word, the evil word sellout, came out. And what was it about? It wasn't about the album. I mean, the album was pretty much praised except for the lack of bass in it, actually. As far as the content, everyone loved it. But one thing some people didn't love is that they did a music video for the song One. And of course, people know it now as a legendary video, right? A great video. It's dark, it's disturbing, kind of beautiful, very intelligently done. But back then, there were a lot of critics like, hey, why are you doing a video? And the reason for that was people in the thrash genre definitely wanted to have a contrasting line between them and all of the 80s schlock, cheese, Motley Crue, Poison, Bon Jovi bullshit. They didn't want no part of that. And that's what those bands did. They made videos, they're all over MTV, making stupid music, looking stupid. And it was more about the look than it actually was about the music. And the thrash enthusiasts and these thrash bands and these artists, they hated that crap. To them, they looked at Metallica like, oh my God, why are you doing something that Bon Jovi would do? Do a video? Are you kidding me? Of course, it was stupid. And look, even the guys in Metallica, in interviews since have, they were hesitant to do it. But they were also a very driven band. They wanted to be a huge band. They wanted to conquer the music world. And eventually they would, but they realized on the way to doing so, you got to be able to push your music out to the biggest audience possible. It's one of the reasons they signed with Elektra. That was also one of the reasons they did a video. They knew if you got play on MTV, more people get exposed to what you're doing, and that helps you grow. For the first 3 albums, they got virtually no radio play. They didn't have any videos, so they couldn't get any play on MTV. And in the 80s and even into the 90s, MTV was kind of the gatekeeper of metal and hard rock. It just was. I mean, if you wanted to sell albums, if you really wanted to push a single, you needed a video in order to do that. You weren't getting on the radio without a video. That's just the way it was. Metallica understood that. They understood the business behind it, so they did the video. And by the way, that whole sellout thing over the video, that kind of faded away pretty quick. Bands like Corrosion of Conformity and Pantera realized, hey, we can do videos, and it's okay. You're not a sellout. You're just doing good business. As long as you don't do some bullshit video. It's got to be something with impact and actually has some punch to it and actually keeps our authenticity and our integrity. Metallica's clearly did that. And by the way, no one ever gave Megadeth shit for doing a video. They did. They did a video. In fact, I think they did a couple videos for their Rust in Peace album. Just saying, which was around the same time, around 88. Of course, the big one, which a lot of people may remember. If you're younger, maybe you don't. But they came out with their self-titled album, the Black Album. And of course, they did a mess of videos for those. That was fine. But man, did the sellout fever hit. They hit Metallica square between the eyes. There's a lot of shit associated with that. So I'm going to really have to break it down. Because like I said, that was at a fever pitch, people talking about Metallica selling out. This wasn't a thrash album. Alright, so all of a sudden, the biggest thrash metal band in the world is putting out an album that's not a thrash album. That presented a huge, and probably the biggest problem. Bob Rock presented a problem. It got out that James Hetfield was taking vocal lessons. That was a problem. And of course, Metallica put out a ballad, and Nothing Else Matters, and that was a big problem. And if you think about it, like I said, Metallica, and especially, I saw an interview with Lars Ulrich when he said, hey, we were wanting to be the biggest band in the world. Now, a lot of people think that Metallica sold out to get to that level. But really, if you look at what they did, they took a lot of they took how a lot of the 80s bands got so big, the model, and they applied it, but they did it on their own terms. Let me walk you through it. First of all, their songs were shorter, and they slowed the tempo down, which basically made them more of a groove band than a thrash band. So they went from being, they're Metallica, but they went, their sound went from a thrash sound more to a Black Sabbath type of sound. As far as I'm concerned, is not a bad idea. The guys who invented and popularized heavy metal, and you're going to kind of use their formula on slowing your music down, little shorter songs. Why the hell not? So the music, just by doing that, became more accessible to a mass audience. And they also, they used Bob Rock. Now, they had producers on all their albums before, but really, their first 4 albums were self-produced, basically. They had a guy there, but really it was James and Lars producing and doing, involved in every process of the making of those albums. And they're great albums. But I think they knew that if they wanted to reach a mass audience, they needed somebody like a Bob Rock. Now, who was Bob Rock? He had made a name for himself producing Motley Crue, Red Flag, really, and The Cult, which not so much a red flag. I mean, they're a well-respected hard rock band. When you produce Dr. Feelgood, it's not going to make the metal community feel good that you're working on a Metallica album. But the reason they used him because, he had really proven that he can put out, he can help bands put out big hits, monster albums. And Dr. Feelgood, like it or not, I don't, but it was a monster album. And the album they did for The Cult with Sonic Temple was one of their bigger albums. Had some huge hits on it, like Firewoman. And by the way, Bob Rock didn't really change how they did anything. They weren't going to do something they didn't want to do. For instance, if you ever saw the 1.5 years of Metallica, which is great, they're making the Black Album. And Bob Rock is trying to get Kirk Hammett to play leads differently, right? More traditional ways of doing it. And there is a big kerfuffle in the middle of this rock documentary, basically. And Kirk basically told him to suck his ass. He wasn't going to change how he did solos to fit what Bob Rock wanted it to sound like. He was going to do it his way. Kirk Hammett did his solos his way, period, end of story. And I just use that as an example that Metallica had always done things their way. All right, whether they were on the small label of Megaforce or when they signed to Elektra, they were always kind of left alone to do their thing. And just because Bob Rock was there to help kind of guide some things, they were still going to do things their way. Kirk Hammett obviously thought, hey, that's not my style. I'm going to lose my authenticity and my integrity if I do solos your way. So I'm not going to do it. Therefore, Kirk Hammett, sorry, he didn't sell out making the Black Album. Now, let's get to one of the big ones. Another big one is the first ballad that Metallica did. Now, they've always done some melodic, slower stuff, but in probably smaller increments like Fade to Black, Welcome Home Sanitarium, even One. So they've always flirted with more of the James kind of singing instead of yelling in key. And like I said, slower, melodic, dare I say, balladish type of sounds in their music. Now they'd always hit you later on in the song and bring it back up. But Nothing Else Matters was their first all the way through. This wasn't no rock jam. They weren't hitting you like at the end of One. Basically was a ballad all the way through. So yes, that is true. They did a ballad. But you know who else did ballads? Black Sabbath. What do you think Planet Caravan is? It's a freaking ballad. So, I mean, Ozzy had straight up sung on several songs that were slow ballads. I'm sorry. I mean, not love ballads. I mean, it's a metal ballad, so is Nothing Else Matters. That's not a love ballad. It isn't Home Sweet Home. So people that were shitting themselves over that, kiss their ass. If they were still doing a thrash album, then of course, no, Nothing Else Matters would have no place on a thrash album. But it wasn't a thrash album. It was a groove metal album, basically, in the same vein of Black Sabbath. And in that vein, you absolutely can do a ballad. And James taking vocal lessons, hey, that was him trying to expand his instrument, broaden his talent. And there's a lot of reasons, some like Slayer, we would never do a ballad. Well, you freaking couldn't. Who's going to sing it? You don't have a singer, you got a yeller. And that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. Same thing with Motorhead, right? That's where thrash basically came from, is Motorhead. Lemmy couldn't sing a ballad. All right, I know he wasn't trying to, but he didn't have that gift. He had plenty of gifts. I mean, the man's a legend, but he didn't have it like that. He had his voice, but he could never do anything slower or a ballad. Ozzy had the chops. Rodney James Dio had the chops. James Hetfield took vocal lessons, so he made sure that he had the chops to be able to pull that off, and he did. The biggest problem why this album in this era was considered a sellout was because Metallica got to be a juggernaut. They weren't the cool garage band that was like your little secret, right? It wasn't that anymore. I mean, it's okay for them to be, big like Master of Puppets big, or even Injustice for All big, right? Because they were getting some radio play, but one wasn't like pour some sugar on me big. It wasn't She's My Cherry Pie big. It was a hit, but it wasn't a monster hit. Not like Enter Sandman. Enter Sandman was a freaking gargantuan freaking hit. And so was Sad But True. So was Nothing Else Matters. And The Unforgiven. They had 4 monster freaking hits on this album. That was the problem. A lot of jealousy. A guy like Kerry King from Slayer, I mean, this dude had tried to sell out normal. They started out looking like old school Motley Crue meets Wasp. All right, because they're trying to like, hey, put the makeup on, let's get some chains and some leather and try to make it that way, try to get some attention. Realizing it doesn't work, and there's Metallica and Megadeth and Anthrax. They just look like they just rolled out of bed and got on stage. I mean, they weren't trying to have an image. So then Slayer backed off of that. And then in the early 2000s, Slayer tried to have their little attempt at new metal, which, by the way, sounded amazing. I actually thought they put out a pretty damn good album. And, of course, we hate that album now. Well, whatever. That's because it shows that you were trying to sell out but couldn't do it. Y'all just didn't have the chops to have it like Metallica did. Or Megadeth. That's what it comes down to. It's this metal ethos, right? Which is a lot like the old school punk ethos. Can't get too big. Don't do a video. And punk, they took it further. I mean, you couldn't sign with a major label. So at least in the metal circles, well, you can make your money. We're not going to be stupid like that. You can make your money. But you can't make too much money. You can't be too big. Not everyone can know about you. You got to be in the underground somewhat. But with the Black Album, Metallica launched out of the underground. And they didn't go to the mainstream. The mainstream came to them. That's another lie that gets told about the Black Album. That somehow Metallica being influenced by grunge, that's what made them go to the Black Album. But the thing was, the grunge movement, it had started, but it wouldn't become the phenomenon until 92. Black Album came out in 91. Albeit later in 91. But Pearl Jam's 10 had came out, I think, in July or August of that year. Nirvana's Nevermind, it came out like around September of that year. They hadn't been out that long. They didn't get to the top part of the charts just yet. And they started getting notoriety and notice, but there wasn't this gigantic explosion overnight for either one of those bands. They really got super freaking huge around 92. Early 92, that's when everything exploded for them. I mean, if you look at it, really, it was Megadeth's Countdown to Extinction, followed up by Metallica's Black Album that really blew up metal. And then after that, the floodgates opened for everybody. Then Nirvana blew up. Then Pearl Jam blew up. Everybody blew up. So really, it was the other way around. It wasn't Metallica trying to compete with grunge. No. They really kicked the door wide open for grunge to be huge. Just look at the timelines of everything. But like I said, there's just a lot of jealousy that they got that big. And anyone that made fun of Enter Sandman, they all wish they wrote it. Every freaking one of them wish they had written that song. So now we're going to go to the third time. Yes, there was a third time that the big sellout card was thrown at Metallica's feet. And that was with the release of Load and Reload. Now, right off the top, these are way, way harder to defend by me. I'm not a big fan of Reload. It just sounds like a bunch of B-sides that didn't make the cut of the first album, Load. But Load is an amazing album. I still love that album. However, it was a huge departure in sound and look. Everyone cut their hair short. All of a sudden, Metallica looked like Stone Temple Pilots. And combine that with Kirk and Lars making out spontaneously at places, and people were like, okay, what is going on? Well, basically, that was Metallica actually being influenced by the grunge and alternative movements of the late 80s into the 90s. And there's no other way to look at it. This is not a metal album. Load or Reload are not metal albums. I don't care what anyone says. Like I said, Load's a great album. Reload, bleh, but they're hard rock / alternative. That's what they are. So when people talk about selling out, did they make those albums just to make money? I don't know. I know they were obviously influenced by the time period that they were in. And by the way, Metallica was never into their look. It was always anti that, right? Because they came up in the era of the big hair metal bands, and they said, "Screw you! We're gonna get on stage in just jeans and a t-shirt, some boots, and we're gonna rock out and screw all that shit." But even the most staunch guys that always wear some skull rings or have some chains on, they do a little something. But now Metallica, Lars has earrings. They all have perfectly done up hair, like they're in GQ magazine, And like I said, they look like STP from the mid '90s. Is that a sellout? Well, it really wasn't Metallica. The authenticity really wasn't there with the look. The sound, to me, is a little bit easier to forgive because Metallica has always been about evolving their sound. All right, so that's why these guys don't sound like they're a thrash band from 1983 anymore. They allowed themselves to evolve. They allowed themselves to become better and better and better musicians and songwriters, and didn't mind experimenting along the way. Now, this is 2 albums back to back. It was supposed to be a double album, but, they decided to release them separately, which also kind of alludes to some selling out. It was a business decision. Instead of doing a double album all at once, we can make more money if we have 2 albums and just release them, 6 months apart. So even though they did some really, really great music on Load, was it a sellout? Kinda was, y'all. Just because more of the style and the look that they chose to go with, and of course this a huge musical departure, they lose some of that authenticity with these releases. And I think the business way of how you release them, instead of doing the double album, you do the 2 singles. Yeah, there's a lot of decisions there made about money. That's what it seemed like. And they could spin it however they want, but it kind of was a sellout. Now the sound they decided to go with, like I said, heavily influenced by people of that day. But if you think about it, they were friends with guys in Blues Traveler, Corrosion of Conformity, a lot of the bands of that time and era. Alice in Chains, they toured with Faith No More, so they were influenced by the time. And I don't think there's a problem being influenced by that. Ozzy was heavily influenced by the 80s. All right, if you look at that dude, it's notably called Ozzy's fat era in the 80s. But the hair was massive, and he really turned the corner in the 90s, where he kind of went to the Prince of Darkness look, kind of left that 80s trash behind. But, that does happen. Aerosmith, you go from Dream On to Lovin' in the Elevator. They're hits, but... So they definitely weren't the first band to be influenced by the era that they're in, or the time period that they're in and what's going on. So I don't really consider it, a massive sellout. Kiss did a disco song. And of course, Ozzy just did a damn song with Post Malone. So, look, you're allowed to be influenced by the time period that you are currently in and what's popular at that moment, and do your own spin on it. And that's kind of what Metallica did. You want to call it a sellout? Okay, maybe to a point. I think there were some definite business decisions in Metallica's era at that point, during Load and Reload, that were money motivated. I think a lot of bands do things that are money motivated, like videos, like doing interviews for radio stations, things of that nature. Is it something that really impacted their authenticity, though? Like I said, I think you could make that case, and I will. I'll make that case, especially with their look, because they really were trying to look a certain way. That really wasn't them, and hadn't been them for the first 10 years of their career. So it was kind of weird. And the sound, I don't know that was a business just strictly for money, how Load and Reload sounded. So I don't know I don't know if those songs are the results of them selling out or just allowing themselves to be influenced by the time. And I think it's probably more of the latter. Like there was a song from Load that I still love to this day, Until It Sleeps. Fantastic song, and a very deep song. It's about James's mother, her battle with cancer. And so it's got some deep personal shit in that song, and I just don't think that you use that just to sell out. There's a lot of personal stuff in there. And then there's songs like Ain't My Bitch. That's clearly some bullshit. I can't totally say that all those songs are authentic. That of course they're not. But there are some that really truly are. And that are just great songs. The Unforgiven 2, great song. Outlaw Torn, fantastic song. So, I don't think it was a complete, just whatever the hell kind of sellout, but it's the closest that you can get to making a case, a really solid case for Metallica selling out, is the Load and Reload period. And of course, after that, they all went back to dressing however they're going to dress, and and went to making whatever music, Saint Anger was. Now, where are we? They are hugely respected. You may still have some butthurt assholes, these pompous jackholes that think they're gatekeepers of metal, kind of like Gary King from Slayer. And they can all kiss my nuts, and they all wish they had Metallica's money, fame, respect, and longevity. Not a lot of bands do. And unfortunately, I think what contributes to metal falling off like it has in the last, 2 decades, is I think there still is a lot of that, don't sell out, dude, don't do this, don't do that. But Metallica is showing you how to stay relevant. Ozzy Osbourne, like I said, doing a song with Post Malone, has shown you in his 70s, he's still more relevant than damn near every present day metal band, period. He makes more news and will get more streams than all of them doing a song with Post Malone. Because say what you want about Sharon, woman's freaking smart as hell. Thanks for watching this video, and never be ashamed to say Metallica's my favorite band. It's my favorite band. That doesn't mean I don't have love for the underground. It doesn't mean that bands like Clutch or Sepultura or Soulfly shouldn't get love and you can't love them too. But damn it, Metallica's done it best. They've done it the longest. They're the best artists. They're the best songwriters. They're the best musicians. So screw off. They rarely disappoint. So in that, Metallica's my favorite band. And if it's your favorite band, buy a Metallica shirt, wear it, and screw everybody. Anyway, I'll be back with some other crap sometime. Bye.